Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Anne Harding. I'm happy to be here with you tonight. Thank you so much for joining us for our third virtual open house for the Calgary Metropolitan Region Board draft growth plan, our engagement process. So we're excited to have folks join us. We had about 70 people register and we only have 15 of you online right now. So I think some people might be just coming along the way, but certainly we welcome those who are here with us now and those who will join us or watch the recording at a later date. I'll just begin with the acknowledgement of the gratitude that I feel is an acknowledgement of being here in Treaty 7 territory, the lands of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani, the Stoney Nakoda nations of Bearspaw, Chiniki, and Wesley, the Tsuut'ina Nation, and Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3, and just the gratitude that I feel for the diversity of these lands and of the people who are here now and who have come before us. And so thank you for sitting with me in that respect and welcome. I'll flip a bit to our agenda for this evening. Hopefully you're all able to see my screen right now. I'll let you know that, that the session is being recorded as our other sessions have been. These get posted to the CMRB YouTube channel as well as to our engagement website. And so that just gives us the opportunity for those who couldn't make it exactly at this time to join us at a later date and to listen to the conversation and see the chat. And just a note for folks who do at some point, we have some opportunities, as it says, for open mic throughout. That would be using the raise hand function in Zoom. And so right now, all of your microphones are off, your cameras are off. We can't see or hear anybody, but we do have the opportunity to open that up and we'll offer a few opportunities. Just want to make sure folks know that your name and voice will be recorded in that if you choose to speak. In terms of what we're here for tonight is just a bit of the sort of overview of the CMRB. We know there's some questions around who they are and what the structure is. And so we have Jordan Copping here with us, who's the Chief Officer of the CMRB, to help answer those questions. We'll talk about the public engagement that's happened to date. So this has been a 9-month process so far. This is the third round of engagement. And so we'll just talk a bit about what we heard, because we know that not everybody has come with us on that full journey. So just want to bring you up to speed. And then we'll get into the draft plan with a specific focus on environmental considerations. So our first open house was focused on community and resident issues and concerns. Our second one focused on economic interests. And here we are focusing tonight on environmental interests also, and just here to answer your questions, but just noting that there's a bit of a content focus on the environmental aspect of the plan. In terms of opportunities to participate and to engage with us tonight, there's a few different ways. So there's a chat box. Laura has been active in that already. Feel free to post comments in that chat. You're able to post comments to everybody for everyone to see, or just to us as panelists. So you're welcome to make those selections and share your chat and comments that you might have. If you do have a question, and very much we're here to answer questions, we want to make sure that everybody has the information that they need to make to provide informed input on the draft growth plan. And so the best way to do that is through the Q&A box. And so that's in your Zoom panel. So where you would see the mute and stop video, there's also a Q&A icon there. And so if you open that up and type in a question, you should all be able to see each other's questions and to like or upvote questions, so that those that we're not repeating ourselves, those that have the same question as their neighbors can make sure that we address those that many people are holding. And I would actually just ask if you're able to keep your comments to the chat box and your questions to the question box. That helps me very much in just organizing how we manage the flow. But certainly I'll be keeping an eye on both of those spaces so that we make sure that you get the information that you need. In terms of just what we need for this conversation tonight, we know that there's different views. We know that the Calgary Metro Region is a diverse place with lots of diverse experiences and perspectives. And we hold all of those here and we value all of those. And so we just ask that that you come with that same curiosity or interest, and generally respect is what we minimum ask of you, is to be respectful of those diversity of opinions. And so definitely disagree with each other, disagree with us, that's totally fine. But please be respectful in your comments. And would love to encourage you to have some curiosity as well about views that others might hold and why they might hold those views, and to sort of listen to understand. I think in some of these stages, when we get to the later stages of engagement, it can become kind of polarized in a for or against, and certainly we're building this region together, and so we're interested in having that curiosity and getting all the different views on the table and really understanding where they come from and what's important to people. If there's anything that we missed from this in terms of what you need to have a good conversation and to have a respectful space, please feel free to type that in the chat, either just to us or for everybody as well. We'd love to get to know a bit about just who's here with us. So Laura, if we can launch that first poll just to understand sort of the perspectives that people hold that they're bringing with them. So you should see a poll pop up with a few options. If you can select the option that best describes where you're from. So if that's from a rural perspective or location, an urban location, or holding both of those, or maybe you're not from the region and you're just joining us. So we'll give folks a minute to respond to that. Okay, and we'll close off that poll. Perfect. So half of you are sort of solely from that rural setting, with a few of you from both of those views. So it's good for us to know in that split that we have. And then, as we said, we also have environmental interests that are we want to make sure that we address, and some content that's specific to environmental considerations of the plan. So we're curious where you would most like us to focus our time, and I think you're able to select all of them if you want, but that doesn't help us to prioritize necessarily. So I'm asking you to pick up to 2 of these areas and topics related to environmental interests that you're most interested in exploring. So flood mitigation, watershed protection, addressing climate change risk, environmentally sensitive areas, water efficiency, or if there's something that's not on this list related to the environment that you'd like to make sure that we explore, please definitely share that in the chat as well. So we'll give folks a few more minutes to select their top 2 items of interest. Give it a couple more seconds. Wonderful. Okay, so we'll close that one off. And so this is just a note for Jonathan and Steve as they prepare to present those sessions, just that there's a keen interest on ESAs. So if you can make sure to be speaking to those and how the plan's related to that, as well as watershed protection, those being the top 2 here. And so if somebody types something in the other related to environmental interest, please do use that chat to let us know what specifically you're hoping to get out of tonight. So I think that's enough from me on this. I'll invite Jordan if you'd like to turn your camera on, and I will just change the deck that we have here. And Jordan, do we have you with us? Awesome.
There we go.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, Anne, and thanks everyone for joining us this evening. I am just going to give a brief overview of the CMRB, when it was created, how it was created, a little bit about our structure, a little bit about our mandate, discuss the voting mechanism, as I know that has been a topic of interest for a lot of people, and also discuss the idea of regional significance. So there are currently 2 growth management boards in Alberta, one that was formed in Edmonton in about 2008, and the Calgary Metropolitan Region Board that was formed in 2018 as a result of the Modernized Municipal Government Act. So effectively, we are a small, not-for-profit Crown corporation, and our mandate and our original work plan was really given to us by the province via the regulation. If we can go to the next slide, please. So our region is very large, it's very diverse, and it has a tremendous opportunity. Our region is comprised of 10 member municipalities, and the board is comprised of an elected official from each of those 10 member municipalities. So as you can see here, we have Airdrie, Calgary, Chestermere, Cochrane, Foothills, High River, Okotoks, Strathmore, Rocky View County, and Wheatland County are 10 member municipalities. It's more than 9,000 square kilometers in our region, and we're home to almost 1.6 million people. Now, the growth plan that we are currently working on and engaging with the public on is a plan for how that we are going to welcome the next million people to this beautiful region that we call home. Next slide, please, Anne. So, as I mentioned, the provincial government determined the composition of the board. However, it also gave the board the authority to essentially determine how they are going to work together. And so originally the board had created 4 committees, a land use committee, an servicing committee, governance committee, and advocacy committee. However, after about 18 months of working together, the board realized that the land use and servicing committee should be combined, as a lot of the issues that they were dealing with were a little bit too closely related to be separated cleanly. And so we joined those 2 committees together. And so now we have 3 committees. Go to the next slide, please. The voting structure. So as I mentioned, there's been a tremendous amount of interest on this. So the regulation from the province mandates the voting model for the CMRB. So a motion passed when 2/3 of the member representing 2/3 of the population vote in favor of something. So what that means is that 7 members, including Calgary, must vote in favor of something to pass. This leads to the idea of the Calgary veto. And so while it is true that Calgary individually can stop something from happening, as Calgary comprises about 84% of the region's population, Calgary cannot make something happen. In order for something to pass, Calgary needs another 6 votes to vote with it to pass a motion. We go to the next slide, please. In late 2018, after the board had finished doing some other work on the interim growth plan, we started doing some visioning work in terms of focus areas for the region. And these focus areas you see in front of you here are the 6 that the board, through 2 days of workshops, settled on: economic well-being, growth management, environmentally responsible land use, optimization of shared services, celebrating our rural and urban differences, and water stewardship. And it is through these 6 lenses that the policy areas of the growth plan have been developed. And Steve and Jonathan will walk us through those tonight. We can go on to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned at the outset, the regulation kind of determines our structure and our work plan really since our inception. So we are required to develop and deliver to the province both growth and servicing plans. In the original regulation, the growth plan was slated to be delivered to the minister no later than December 31st, 2020. However, as COVID set in and the impacts of the pandemic were starting to be felt, the board in June of 2020 decided to ask the minister for a 4-month extension. In October of 2020, the minister granted a 2-month extension out to March 1st of 2021. So the board, along with the consultant HDRC and ourselves, reworked the schedule and set to in order to meet that March 1st deadline. However, by about mid-January, it became apparent that while potentially we could have met the deadline, it wouldn't necessarily have been in the best interest of the region. And in addition, a number of our members wanted to be able to do a 3rd round of public engagement on the draft plan. So because of that, the board passed a motion in late January asking the minister for an extension out to June 1st of 2021. The minister has granted that extension, and we are now working towards that deadline. It's important to note that the regulatory requirements indicate what must be in the growth and servicing plans. However, how we meet those regulatory requirements is really up to the board. If we can go to the next slide, please. So here is some of the requirements lifted directly from the regulation for the growth plan. So we must have policies around corridors for recreation, transportation, energy transmission. We must have policies around environmentally sensitive areas, about how we're going to coordinate infrastructure planning and development amongst our 10 member municipalities, policies about new settlement areas and intensification of existing settlement areas, how conservation of agricultural lands will be approached, and how we're going to implement the growth plan. If we can go to the next slide, please, Anne. Now, the servicing plan is a little bit different because the only must that is included in the regulation for the servicing plan is that it must support the growth plan. After that, what is included in the servicing plan really becomes a may. And through dialogue with the board in 2018 and into 2019, the board really chose to focus on kind of three areas: transportation, including transit, water, wastewater, and stormwater, and recreation. Now, that doesn't mean that solid waste and emergency services aren't of great interest to the board, but recognizing that developing the growth plan and the servicing plan simultaneously is a pretty significant piece of work. The board chose to focus their efforts onto those three areas, while maintaining that we're going to continue to work on the other areas either post growth plan or kind of concurrently in the case of looking at policing in the Calgary Metropolitan Region, but that work would not be included in the servicing plan. If we can go to the next slide, please. So the last point I really kind of want to touch on here is regional significance, because a number of people that are participating in the public engagement really comes down to how is this going to impact me? If I want to put up a shed, is the CMRB going to have an impact on that? And the answer is no. So regional significance is really where the 10-member municipalities agree that some type of development is going to have a potentially regional impact. And under the interim growth plan, which is in effect right now, the 10-member municipalities had agreed that developments under 50 dwelling units can be approved without any regional approval. And for the growth plan, as it currently stands, the draft growth plan, we kept that threshold of 50 dwelling units and also added that any employment areas under 8 lots or 20 acres also do not require any regional approval. So it kind of really eliminates those small developments and focuses on something that has a regional significance. Thank you so much, Anne, and I'm happy to answer some questions.
Awesome, thank you very much. Had to find my panel, so that's great. So a few questions just for clarification that have come through. And so in terms of the composition of the board, there's been a question about the Tsuut'ina Nation or other First Nations and why they wouldn't be part of the board if they're within the boundary, if you can speak to that.
Sure. We have reached out to them, but the composition of the board was really dictated by the province. And part of the reason, my understanding that part of the reason that the First Nations were not included is because not only do the board members have to come together and agree on how they're going to develop, then they have to adhere to that. And that is not possible on First Nations territory because they are a separate nation. And so they would not be subject to provincial legislation. So we, and actually with Anne's help, have reached out to the nations that are both inside the boundary of the CMR and also adjacent to the CMR to engage them and see how they would like to work together, either now or in the future, potentially on things like servicing or other opportunities for collaboration.
Great, thanks for that. And I guess just clarifying when the CMRB was created, and just was that by an order in council by the NDP?
So yes, it was created January 1st, 2018 is when the regulation came into effect. However, we have engaged with, now 3 members of the UCP government who have served as the Minister of Municipal Affairs. And we have received letters of support from 2 of them about how they support regional growth and planning for that so that we can do it in the most effective way possible.
Great, thanks very much. And then, so Gloria had a question earlier about the voting structure and just asked a follow-up, asking if votes occur only on if applications meet municipality legislation. And so I wonder if maybe you can just speak to the different levels of planning and sort of what's in a municipality's jurisdiction and what's in CMRB's.
Sure. So really what we're laying out is a framework for collaboration amongst the 10-member municipalities. However, the municipality actually is the one that still approves development, actually issues that permit to go forward and build whatever it is that the applicant is looking to build. So really what it is we're coming together to agree on certain thresholds. And as long as the development is above that type of threshold in whatever way that is, or meets that requirement, then it would be measured against what's called the Regional Evaluation Framework, or REF as it's sometimes referred to. And we as administration, as long as it meets that, we would recommend that the application be approved.
Awesome, thanks. And just a couple follow-ups from your previous question around the creation of CMRB. Are the letters from UCP members or the municipal affair ministers available on the website for viewing?
I believe so. I think that we have included them in meeting packages.
Sounds good. So we can.
I honestly just don't remember off the top of my head.
Okay, we could dig that answer out for Dana, who's interested in that. So certainly. And Ross is just really keen. Was it an order in council? I guess that created the CMRB.
Well, it was, so growth management boards were, I would say, enabled under the Municipal Government Act. And then the details of the growth management boards are sorted out through regulation, which are passed through orders in council, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We'll likely bring you back along the way, but we'll let you go for now.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jordan. Okay, and then let's see, maybe what we'll do here, I'll just do a quick overview of the public engagement process to date. But maybe before we do that, Lara, if we can launch the next poll that just shares and asks sort of how people have participated to date, just so we have an idea on on where people are coming from and sort of how much information you already have or might be looking for. So looking for just how much you've engaged with the CMRB growth plan development so far. So phase 1 was last summer, phase 2 was in November. If you've reviewed the FAQs on the website, attended either one of our open houses, or completed the survey, or contributed to a discussion forum, or if this is your first time. And so all of whatever applies to you, we would love for you to fill that out just to help give us an idea of how much information we're repeating and how much might be new for folks. So we'll just give another few seconds to complete these. Okay, we'll close that off. Perfect. So it seems that 70% of you have already filled out the survey. So hopefully after this, if you have more information, you can add to a discussion forum to engage further. But it seems that we have at least half of you have been to an open house previously, and about a third having participated in one of these previous phases. So I will share information about what went on in those previous phases, or what those were about. We know that this certainly we've had a lot of engagement this round, a lot of responses, particularly from certain areas, and so keen to share the information about what's happened so far. So in terms of the involvement, public engagement previous, there's been over 5,000 visits to the public engagement website before this phase of engagement, with over 1,700 sort of individual contributions to the engagement that's happened so far. And what we really look for in the public engagement is that it reflects the geography of the region in relative proportion. And so within those two phases, we certainly didn't have the overall population of Calgary, but we had a fairly even spread. So that was a good indicator for us of participation that was representative of the region, I guess. In terms of what we heard, and so this is really where the growth plan has developed from. In that first round of engagement, we had three different scenarios, and those scenarios were the result of different hypothetical choices that could be made. They weren't, discrete 1, 2, 3 options, but we had a business as usual. If we keep doing what we're doing, what will our outcome be, or what will that look like? If we make choices in a particular direction, and sort of gave people what our modeling showed based on different choices that were made about things like density and growth areas. And so from those, people told us what mattered to them. So again, we weren't asking for are you for this or against this? We were saying, what matters to you? Like, what do you really care about in these different scenarios? What do you like about them and what don't you? So that we could take different attributes from different scenarios and build a proposed approach. And so the things that we heard were important to people is to decrease sprawl. to maintain choice and diversity, that there's strong planning, that whatever is planned in terms of development and infrastructure, that it's coordinated and thought through in advance, and that we really leverage the regional scope for economic development. People saw value in rural and urban areas of the region collaborating for a stronger region together. In the second phase, we came forward with a specific proposed approach that was not one of the three, but had attributes of the three. And we said, okay, here's what we're pitching. What do you think? And what do you like about it? How would this affect you in your community and your municipality? So alongside the public engagement, there's been significant engagement with municipalities in terms of elected officials and staff. And so from the public engagement in that scenario and in that proposed approach, these are the main themes that we heard from all of the comments about what's important to people. Minimizing land consumption was a really, really strong theme that came out through those. And you'll see a lot of that in the plan that's proposed in front of you. Minimizing water use and environmental impacts, making choices that contribute to a lower, less environmental footprint, and still though being able to retain the diversity and the uniqueness of different parts of the region. Those pieces all came into the plan that we have in front of us. And so we already answered this question. And so I think what I'm going to do now, I'm going to stop sharing and just see, I'll take a pause and see if there's anybody who's interested in sharing just a specific question or something that you're interested in learning about this evening that you're hoping to walk away with. And so if there is somebody who's interested in sharing that, I'll ask you to use the raise hand function to raise your hand, and then I'll be able to open up your microphone just to give that opportunity to hear from you directly what you're most interested to hear about. Okay, I don't see any showing up, so I will give one more second. No, okay, we will carry on, and I'm happy to continue receiving those questions that are answered, or questions that are received through the Q&A. I will again remind you, if you can keep your comments to the chat and your questions to the question box, that's really helpful for us to just make sure we're able to address everything that's important to people, and to give you space to have those comments to respectfully disagree. That's full on available to you as well. So Jonathan, I think I will bring you forward and have you talk a bit about the draft plan.
Excellent, thank you much. Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Excellent. Might as well check that, the proverbial I'm on mute. So as Anne mentioned, the goals of the plan do build on public engagement that took place, as well as the many engagements with the board and the committees that have taken place over the many months of the drafting of this plan. And there are three key goals that you'll see in front of you here. Goal 1 focuses on a balanced way of growth with a variety of land uses. That doesn't mean everything everywhere, but it does mean trying to provide within the region a variety of opportunities for housing and opportunities for different non-residential uses. Goal 2 focuses on a really key aspect of the growth plan, which is reducing the amount of land and resources that are consumed from development. And you'll see a lot of focus in the policy work within the plan on that goal. And number 3 focuses on growing in a fiscally sustainable way, which is believed to really need an integration with regional servicing. And you'll see that linkage with the servicing plan as well. Next. So the consultant team, led by regional planning expert Peter Calthorpe and the team at HDRC, undertook a number of regional scenarios that focused on how the region grows over time to reach the next 1 million people, as Jordan mentioned, and approximately the next 500,000 jobs. So the question was not whether the region would reach 1 million, so we're not trying to constrain development in any way, but rather how it would be focused in how the region could best reach the next 1 million people and then the next half million jobs. So each scenario that was undertaken looked at more or less development in various place types. And place types is somewhat of a new word for the region, but it replaces the more traditional planning focus on density as the key metric for understanding how land should develop. And unlike density, place types provide a sense of the quality and experience and include consideration for both people and jobs, and an emphasis on mixing people and jobs together. So the proposed approach applies a core belief that successful places, whether it be neighborhoods, towns, urban areas, metro regions, must be diverse in those uses and users, and must be scaled to the pedestrian and human interaction, and must be environmentally sustainable. Next. So throwing some numbers and graphs at you here. And so what these graphs show is the result of comparing a traditional subdivision, so you see that in yellow, with these more preferable, more mixed use place types. So we have mixed use centers and master plan place types here compared to your typical single use subdivision. And so at the top right there, you see VMT per HH, little confusing lingo. So that's vehicle miles traveled per household. And you'll see that the mixed use and master plan communities have less vehicle miles traveled. And subsequently down the list there, you'll see benefits for those mixed use and master plan place types in comparison to a traditional single use subdivision. So in terms of measurable performance, the mixed use centers and master plan place types perform better. And so thus the growth plan has an emphasis of moving the region towards those place types. Next. So here's a few visual examples of what we're calling the preferred place types. So infill and redevelopment within urban areas, obviously using your existing infrastructure and services and amenities, mixed use centers and TODs, which means transit oriented developments, and then master plan communities. Next. Oh, just go back one. I think he skipped over. Oh, there we go. So if you're wondering just what across the region might fit into these different place types, there's a few examples here for infill and redevelopment, master plan communities, and mixed use and TODs. As well, here we've listed the minimum densities that are within the draft growth plan. So as you see in the middle there, hamlet growth areas, the minimum density is 6 DU/AC, which means dwelling units per acre. And within joint planning areas, you have 8 dwelling units per acre. And within the city of Calgary, it's a little bit more each time, so 10 dwelling units per acre. And if you move to the right, you see the minimum densities for the mixed use TOD place type, which are slightly higher. Next. So there are 3 preferred growth areas within the draft growth plan. So the first one is the 7 urban areas, and those were articulated by Jordan earlier. Next. So if we envision the region historically, it would have started largely with urban development being within the urban areas. And so most of you over time understand that those spaces between the urban areas are seeing a lot of growth pressure. And so within the draft growth plan, 3 identified joint planning areas are proposed. There may be a 4th, which is the splitting of the southern one between Okotoks and High River. So there may be 4, but it's three distinct areas. And those joint planning areas have specific policy within the draft growth plan to see urban styles of development within those areas. Next. So the last preferred growth area is hamlet growth areas. So these rural nodes that aren't contiguous to any other urban area and are within the rural areas. And service those rural areas and provide for a little bit of a different form of development, either building off of an existing hamlet or could perhaps be a new freestanding settlement area. Next, I think that might be it. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. And I'll just do a quick scan here on the area. So asking if the Calgary growth area includes land not already within the city boundaries. So I guess if you can speak to the urban municipality of Calgary and its, I guess, the growth area that's defined within the plan.
So within the plan, the urban municipalities are proposed as they are, I guess you'd say. Their geographic boundaries and the lands outside of any urban area that is within a joint planning area is proposed for urban style preferred place types. However, I don't know if the question's alluding to annexation, but the plan doesn't address that. It addresses it through the joint planning areas. The joint planning areas require a context study, which will be done jointly with the applicable municipalities. And it's there that the three municipalities, often three, it could be two, address growth on their fringes.
Great, thanks very much. And Steve, I saw you pop on. I'll get you to come back because I don't know if this is a you or a Jonathan question. But in terms of the planning horizon, so Bo's wondering if it could be extended to say 50 or 100 years. And maybe you can speak to the time nature. We've talked about the next million people and maybe speak to that time projection as well.
Yeah, sure. And Jordan might want to jump in here. Certainly the task at hand for this particular growth plan was for the next million, and we do expect that to happen in the vicinity of 2048, 2050, 2052, just depending on how fast growth goes. I'm sure there's always opportunities in the future to look at other horizons, but this particular plan, in order to sort of keep it focused, is on that next million population.
Thanks very much. And while we have Jordan, I can just ask you the question of sort of the decisions that the board made on how to approach this plan and who to approach with it. And so maybe if you can talk a bit to the selection process for HDR Calthorpe that's here.
Sure, thanks so much, Anne. Yeah, so for our procurement policy, any contract over $75,000, we must go out to tender. There were a number of firms that submitted a tender. We discussed it with the board, and HDRC was selected via a vote of the board.
Thanks very much. Okay, thanks, Jordan. Thanks, Jonathan. We'll keep Steve with us here and bring you guys back after the fact. And so just a reminder to folks, if there's specific questions that you want woven in, please use the Q&A box. And Gloria, I see yours. We'll get to that in the next round after we get to this piece. And just Steve, there's been a note around wildlife corridor, so I don't know if you saw that in the chat, but as the separate piece to address as well.
Yeah, sure.
Awesome.
Thank you. So I'm going to just walk through some of the other elements of the growth plan beyond the growth management components. Next slide, please. I will say, however, the focus of the growth plan is growth management. So it's, we've had some discussion with business groups last time and sort of reiterated that it's not an economic development plan. It supports economic development. In the same case here, this is not an environmental management plan, but growth management does support the environment. And it's important that the two can't be completely unpacked and that sort of thing. But I should point out that the primary policies in the growth plan are related to growth management, but growth management is an important tool to address environmental effects of urban and rural growth in the region. And in particular, probably one of the greatest tools we have in terms of the environment is the policies around compact, mixed use, and coordinated growth, which all lead to things like reduced land consumption. So having that compact growth form reduces the amount of land that is taken away from the environment. It reduces resource use. It reduces water use in particular. We reduce emissions again when things are located close to one another. Next slide. However, we do have a number of policy areas. One is environmentally responsible land use. And again, the goals, Jonathan went through the goals on the growth management piece. some of the goals that the board has set around environmentally responsible land use for the region are recognizing the important role of natural systems in the region, and also taking a leadership role in regional planning and minimize the impacts of our development on land, water, and air. Next slide. So to that end, we have a few policy areas that have been identified. One is flood-prone areas, and again, this sort of dates back to some of the flooding issues that we've seen in Calgary in the last decade. In terms of the overall policies, there's confirmation of the existing provincial standards for much of the area, but also includes a higher standard of protection for new greenfield developments, and looking for protection measures to the 1 in 200 year level, where the provincial standards are at the 1 in 100 year level. And also includes some advocacy with the province around increasing the standard that the province works to as well. There are specific policies around environmentally sensitive areas, and a fairly explicit definition in the growth plan on what an environmentally sensitive area is. The policies are not long, but they do require area structure plans to include identification and mapping of environmentally sensitive areas. And where environmentally sensitive areas are identified within or near a proposed area structure plan, so a new development, there'd be a requirement to do an environmental study and identify mitigation in areas where environmentally sensitive areas are defined. It also has provisions for municipal development plans to include mapping of environmentally sensitive areas, and then consolidation of that mapping into a common regional database to be held by the CMRB. So building up that database over time. Certainly in the background work that was done, it was found that there is there really wasn't a good common database throughout the region. So that's something that would happen over time and be built. On climate change, again, the policies are not particularly long, and that's partly because, again, the growth management policies really are intended to help address climate change by reducing our trip lengths and reducing the carbon emissions resulting from our building types and travel. But it does include some policies around requiring municipal development plans to have a commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to reduce water consumption, and also for municipal development plans to include policies that identify and mitigate the risks of climate change. Next slide, please. So the next policy area is water stewardship, and this is one that's, of course, of great interest to the Calgary region. Very, very interesting to most regions, but Calgary really does have some extra interest, both in terms of water quality and water quantity. Now, the goals that the board has set for the region include having a strategy that promotes healthy people, ecosystems, and resilience to drought and flood, and also having a coordinated approach to water, wastewater, and stormwater to provide safe and healthy water for the region. Next slide. There is a companion document, a companion plan that goes with the growth plan. It's the servicing plan, and it really is in some ways an implementing document of the growth plan. And this particular topic around water stewardship is a strong connection to the servicing plan. The servicing plan is actually where we identify the priorities and the next steps that need to happen around water stewardship. There is not a lot of specific policy in the growth plan, around specifics around, and there was a question around wildlife corridors, for example. It doesn't address that. Those are the kinds of things that can be looked at as we go forward. But some of the areas that are mentioned and then are identified as priorities for future work in the servicing plan deal with things like watershed protection, around the advocacy for headwater protection and ongoing assessment of upstream reservoirs. Stormwater management is a significant issue, both at a sub-regional level in those joint planning areas and in other areas of growth, but also at a regional level. And again, the growth plan speaks to having some regional leadership and understanding the impacts to regional infrastructure systems. Water efficiency, and again, reducing the amount of water used. The growth management policies help do that in some areas, but there's also a number of other areas that the region and the individual municipalities can be looking at to make more efficient use of the water that we have. And finally, around collaboration and governance, and again, both at the regional and sub-regional levels, the growth plan and followed up in the servicing plan identify further investigation of collaboration approaches in the in both of those plans. And with that, I will open it back up to Q&A. Anne.
Awesome, thanks very much. So we will grab Jonathan and Jordan if you'd like to come back on, and I'll give it just a shot. So Steve, we do have a few questions specific to those, but we'll bring everybody back on and just ask though if there's anybody with an interest in sharing a specific question with using that raise hand function. Our team's doing a lot of talking tonight, so happy to share a bit of airtime. If there's anybody who'd like to open their mic and ask a question rather than needing to type it in. Okay, I'll keep an eye on that. We're kind of into our open session, and so if you do have something that you want to ask specifically, please do feel free to use that raise hand function. So a question, Steve, if you can speak to sort of, we have those metrics or the benefits that are being proposed through the plan. What's the evidence behind those? Like, how are those determined?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of that is based on best practices and an investigation of experience elsewhere, and combined with understanding what the current situation is in Calgary. So it is really based on a fairly deep level of research in terms of what we know when we go to change densities and change mixed use and change the proximity of land uses to one another, based on what's been seen in many other areas around, and some of it is based directly on Calgary experience as well.
Great. And are there any specific examples that you can pull out from municipalities in North America that are sort of achieving these targets or seeing the benefits?
Yeah, I mean, there's most municipalities that have shown some form of increased compact growth are seeing these benefits. We've seen them in Calgary. Even we take a look at the transportation side of things and the vehicle kilometers per household. We have seen that the vehicle kilometers per household in those more mixed use types of communities and master plan communities are performing better than we see in the traditional residential community or residential subdivision, just as an example.
Great, thanks very much. And just, I guess, again, in terms of going back to environmentally sensitive areas, and so do you have offhand how those are defined or how they're being proposed to be defined?
I don't have the definition memorized. It's in the plan, but really it is in general, and please don't quote me, but I'm going to try to remember it here. It really is about the natural systems in the region that address things like water quality and water quantity, providing protection against drought and flood, things like identified areas that provide habitat for identified local species of interest, species of conservation concern, that sort of thing. It includes the provincial environmentally significant areas, really anything that contributes to important ecosystem functions at the local scale. So it would be mapped out as part of a development approval process.
And Steve, just want to touch on, there were some comments throughout the process of having a common definition and the need for that.
Yeah, no, good point. Thank you. Yeah, there are differing definitions across the region, although most of them are not that different than the definition that we have in the growth plan. And I will note that the definition in the growth plan is one that was agreed upon by the various municipalities that make up the member municipalities. So the subject matter experts from each of those municipal administrations were involved in setting that definition.
Awesome, thanks. And Lara, maybe we'll get you to share the link directly to the draft plan so that folks can go and look in there. And Steve, I assume there's a section on environmentally sensitive areas. Yeah,
there is a specific policy section, and then the definition, and many of the definitions related to environmentally sensitive areas is in the glossary component of the plan.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks very much. We'll get that in the chat there for folks. So a couple, let's see, where are we going to go next? This is great. The questions are all coming through. So maybe this is authority on CMRB. So fill this out. So Janet's wondering if the CMRB environmental policies have any authority to ensure adequate environmental protection for natural resource extraction. So specifically gravel pits for that, but also more broadly where the levels fall. Jordan came off mute, so he's going to talk.
Sure, I'm happy to start it. So if you want to think about it in terms of the hierarchy of plans, so there's Municipal Government Act, the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan, and then the Calgary Metropolitan Region Growth Plan kind of fits in right there. So in terms of the specific environmental requirements which must be met for resource extraction, the growth plan is silent on that, partially because that is something that's handled through Alberta Environment and Parks. Really what we're focused on is the development side of things here with the growth plan. So for example, we would not say that if you're going to have, the plan does not speak to and should not speak to environmental considerations around, aggregate extraction or anything like that.
Thanks very much for that. Bigger picture, global warming. Could you please elaborate further on how this is contemplated in the plan, or if there are alternative planning models that have been considered?
Yeah, sure. I know it's not an explicit, climate change plan, and that may be something that comes later for the region if the board wants to go there. But it really is, it's an understanding of best practices around, growth management and where growth management can have positive effects relative to how we've done things in the past. And again, it comes back to, and I'm going to sound a bit repetitive here, but it comes back to that notion of more compact, mixed use, and coordinated growth helps all those aspects that are related to climate change. It's not going to solve climate change, obviously, but relative to how we've done things in the past, it has shown improvements.
Also, Stephen, we should mention that there is an added requirement that municipal development plans, which is the key plan for each municipality, needs to now have some climate change policies and to address climate change. A lot of them already do, but this is an added requirement that will be across the region now. And so it follows a lot of other jurisdictions. British Columbia has the same requirement or a similar requirement for their community plans. So that's a new thing, I would say, for the region.
Awesome. And I think there's a question and so Ron, if I'm misinterpreting this, please feel free to correct me, but is an assumption of the plan that that there's man-made climate change and that we need to reduce carbon dioxide emissions?
I don't think it's an assumption of the plan, but rather a recognition that reduction of greenhouse gases is one of the benefits that we have with the type of growth that is proposed in the plan. It's not, as I said, it's not a climate change plan, it's rather a growth management plan, but it has a number of benefits that are related to climate change.
Great, thanks. So I'm going to flip to some questions related to the servicing aspect, or that might relate there. So David's asked if schools and hospitals or medical services are addressed in the plan.
No, they're not. Again, the servicing plan is intended to support the growth that is laid out in the growth plan. Things such as schools, hospitals, medical services, that still remains solely the purview of the provincial government and its school boards.
Great, thanks for that. And so just wondering if the servicing strategy has been released, that there seems to be a lot of overlap between the environmental issues and servicing issues. So I guess the timeline for that.
Yes, so the most recent version of the servicing plan, I believe, is, if it's not on our website yet, it will be on our website tomorrow, getting ready for the next Land Use and Servicing Committee meeting coming up next Thursday. And so that can be found on our website under our meetings tab.
Great. And Lara, I'll get you to pop the website address there, that's in the chat as well, so people have that to reference. All right, let's see. So other types of impacts. So how are non-residential or non-residual nuisance type of impacts like noise and light factored into the planning process?
Jonathan, you want to jump in on that one?
Sure. Typically, that would be dealt with at the municipal level, so not at the regional level. The regional plan doesn't get into those details, as we believe it's best directed through the municipalities and dealt with at that scale.
Great, thanks. And so Renee has shared the region's really diverse, and there's lots of different environments, wildlife habitats. So how does the CMRB ensure the protection of those areas?
Yeah, so again, the CMRB is not going to be able to actually absolutely ensure all protection and that sort of thing. But again, it requires new developments through area structure plans to look at those environmentally sensitive areas. And the environmentally sensitive areas are defined in part as locally sensitive species and habitats. So when the developer is looking at environmentally sensitive areas, it will be specific to the environment in which that development is occurring. So it should be to the local conditions, not a generalized approach that it's not a one size fits all, I guess.
Great, thanks. Maybe if you can speak to the use of data in the plan, and so the COVID and current realities, and just sort of how, is the data that's been used out of date, and sort of address that concern.
I'll answer part, but I think Jonathan can help out as well. The data is, any planning exercise you go through, your data's, it's out of date the day it's collected almost, and we're never going to have perfectly up-to-date data, and certainly COVID is a challenge that goes through with this, but it doesn't invalidate any of the work that's been done. Certainly, we know that even if we have more people working from home after the pandemic is over, we still know that those mixed-use developments and the more compact developments are still going to reduce travel, because a lot of that travel is not just about having people close to jobs, but it's having people close to the day-to-day things. We still have to go get groceries, you still have to go to the pharmacy, you still have to go visit friends, all that sort of thing. So all the day-to-day living is still occurring. We also know that some of the areas that are less impacted by COVID or came out of it sooner, places like Australia, we're seeing return to fairly typical things that we saw before. But again, even if we have a higher work from home, it doesn't really change the data all that significantly.
Great, thanks. And I only have one other question to address so far, so happy for folks to raise those hands and ask questions or ask a few more. But a question on rural clusters. So rural cluster development. So they've been proposed in the past to increase population densities in rural areas, open areas at risk of being developed at a later date. This can have a significant impact on surrounding communities in terms of traffic, roads, water supply, sewage, school capacity, etc. So can you describe a bit more detail as to what's envisioned in the plan related to units per acre and sort of density around the rural cluster development? Jonathan's going for it.
Sure. So there's a rural residential / country cluster place type, and the base density of that is 0.5 units per acre, so approximately 2 acre lots. And if that is to be clustered, it can be clustered up to 3 units per acre. However, there's a maximum of 80 units if clustered. So if you take, a quarter section and you do it in 2 acre lots, that's one thing. If you cluster it, you can do that on approximately 30 acres, and then the rest would need to be preserved open space, is what it stated in the plan. Stephen, did I miss anything there?
Yeah, I think the only other part to that, the half a unit an acre has to be respected, but you can cluster some of them into 3 units an acre, up to 80 units in that. But the overall density has to be that half unit an acre, so that you couldn't go and infill that open space, because you would be then contravening the half unit an acre. So it's a gross density half unit an acre, and you can cluster up to 80 units into 3 units an acre.
And I guess just to clarify too, this is what the draft plan states. And even if the draft plan gets approved, a developer would still have to go through the channels of the municipality and move an application forward up to the regional level. So there's both municipal and regional level approval that would be required.
Thanks very much for that. Okay, I don't see any more open questions. I'm wondering if there are any that we have. We've had a smaller group. We often, as I said, wonder. So we have 20 folks online right now, and so that's helpful for us to sort of understand the evening and daytime participation differences. But we were happy to make this time available for the folks who were able to join us. I'll give a bit of our close and keep an eye certainly open on the question box, but happy to have us. And oh, perfect, we've got another question while I was rambling. So what's the specific plan to ensure communities integrate climate mitigation, adaptation, and disaster risk reduction considerations into all aspects of regional and local planning? So is this up to municipalities to handle separately?
I think the answer is yes and no. It is up to the municipalities through their municipal development plans, and there's a requirement, as Jonathan and I mentioned before, there's a requirement now for municipalities to include climate change policy and identification of risks and mitigation within their municipal development plans. So it is partly the responsibility of the municipality, but the region with this policy is requiring municipalities to take on that responsibility.
Great, thanks. Okay, while we're closing off, I've got a couple of just polls to know how this session worked for you, and so we'll pop those up. Lara, just wondering if this session met your expectations in terms of learning. So these, as we said, we're here to help people understand the plan and sort of what went into the draft plan. And so just wondering if this open house met your expectations for learning about the draft regional plan. Yeah, and so if you can fill that poll out, pick the answer that best reflects your experience this evening. That would be appreciated. This helps us in COVID times doing the engagement virtually. It's a bit tricky, so we're happy to understand if this is working for you. So Lara will close that off. And so 80-20 rule. So for 80% sounds like we were able to at least help inform. So hopefully this was a worthwhile hour for folks here. So thanks for that. And then we'll just ask a couple more. This was, yes, if it met your expectations. Oh, this was for participation. I'm sorry, this for participation. And so we've got your ability to answer questions and get your questions answered. That's great. And we'll ask the next poll. And so here we have, did it meet your expectations for learning? Hopefully folks also read that. I read that differently. So thanks for addressing this one about learning and our ability to understand at least where the plan's coming from. We know that not everybody agrees with it, but we do know that it's a complex subject matter. And so we're happy to help answer some of the questions as we're able to. Okay, and we'll close that one up. Excellent. And so I'll ask our final poll question. So today is the final day for input. We have always left the engagement website open like the morning after in case there's sort of stragglers who, oh shoot, can I still give input? We definitely don't sort of want to close everybody off. So if you haven't participated in the survey, we would love for you to go and do that. The discussion forums also give an opportunity for you to come back to, read other people's responses, ask other questions, and sort of have some of that community conversation that you would typically have at an in-person open house or forum. So just curious about your intentions, and as we know, 70% of you just about have already participated in the survey. We hope that you'll go back to the discussion forum as well. So we'll close this off, and for those who haven't, you will now go and fill it out, which is great. That's really helpful for us to have the more views, the better from across the region. Jordan, are you still around and available? I know Jordan had, maybe, yes. Just, I guess, for one last time, can you tell us about the voting structure?
Sure, happy to. So the voting structure is laid out in the regulation, and for a motion to pass, 2/3 of the members who represent 2/3 of the population have to support something. So what that means is 7 members, and one of them has to be Calgary, have to vote for something. So this discussion of the Calgary veto. So can Calgary individually stop something from happening? Yes, but Calgary cannot individually make something happen. They need support from 6 other members on the board.
Okay, so they don't have the deciding vote on everything. They have to also have 6 members to make something happen.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks so much for that. Okay, happy to sneak that last question in. I haven't seen any others come up, so I will thank everybody for coming out tonight and logging on. And please do go and fill out that survey if you haven't. And we look forward to, and you can also subscribe for updates on the website. So when we have more information to share, we will send that out to our distribution list. So that's how you can stay in touch with what's happening with the growth plan if you haven't already subscribed, or just keep an eye on the CMRB website. So thanks very much, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Take care.